gold was knowledge. Knowledge was their treasure.
Hello, I'm Ricky.
And I'm Sydney.
Throughout history, there have been bizarre and unexplained discoveries throughout the globe. Some have been covered up while others completely forgotten. Should they be? Are we actually moving forward in our understanding of our history or going backwards? Maybe we are just creating an entirely new history and religion worldwide.
We know that in the 1st century BC, the great library of Alexandria in Egypt was burnt by the Roman Empire. Many records were lost forever. This library contained vast annals of human history, along with their discoveries, practices, and inventions. Could the library have contained the records of entire nations, untold wars? Could there have been detailed descriptions of creatures that have been forgotten today? What if there were medical books full of information of how advanced surgeries were performed in the ancient world?
Let's have a closer look as we go through a countdown of 10 mysteries of the ancient world.
Number 10. Atomic glass. On July 16th of 1945, the United States Army tested the first nuclear weapon. As the mushroom cloud rose over the Trinity site in Alamogordo, New Mexico, we knew the world would never be the same. During the blast, something interesting happened. The sand on the desert floor melted and fused to create a new type of stone. Scientists dubbed this stone Trinitite. This green Alamogordo glass is, understandably, slightly radioactive, only about as much as standing outside on a sunny day, but that's expected to dissipate over time, which brings us to the ancients and the discovery of moldavite. This green glassy stone was discovered in the 1780s and presented to the scientific community by Josef Mayer of Prague. The common theory is that they originate from meteor impacts, but do they really? Several specimens of moldavite have been found in places where no meteor is present, and the lovely green is quite reminiscent of that Alamogordo blast glass. Moldavite is not considered to be radioactive, although it does contain potassium, which is considered a radioactive element as it emits gamma rays. But, it's non-hazardous to humans in small enough quantities. Is it possible that there's another explanation for the similarities between nuclear blast glass and ancient moldavite? Did the ancients have nuclear technology? You decide. We're moving on now to number 9, American pyramids.
If I ask you about the pyramids, you would undoubtedly think of Egypt right off the bat. Egypt is the land of pyramids. At least that's what we're taught in the textbooks. Did you know that there are pyramids in America? Just outside of St. Louis, Illinois, is an archaeological park. It's the only thing that remains of the ancient city of Cahokia. Cahokia was the largest and most influential urban settlement of the Mississippian culture. Its population was around 20,000 people in its peak, somewhere between the year 1050 and 1350 AD. Now, the Great Pyramid that sits in Giza is a bit higher than Monk's Mound at Cahokia. but sits on 14 acres at the base. Monk's Mound, which is the largest pyramid of Cahokia, sits on 13.8 acres as well, and is 100 foot high. The top of this pyramid is half an acre. I've stood on it, and the view is breathtaking. However, that's not the only pyramids in the Americas. Heck, the Great Pyramid of Giza is not even the largest in the world. In 1945, U.S. Air Force pilot James Guzman, during a flight between China and India, reported seeing a gigantic white-topped pyramid in a level valley after banking to avoid a mountain. There are actually 7 pyramids down there. The big one is 1,200 foot high and 2,000 foot at the base. The Chinese pyramid is known as the Shanxi Pyramid, and it's much greater than the one in Giza. And Mexico has the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. There are actually 3 at one place. Off the coast of Bermuda, out in the ocean underwater, are huge structures. I've got sonar print out here. Looks like pyramids to me. Where did they come from? Why are they at the bottom of the ocean? Are we being told the whole truth? It's your call. Moving on.
Number 8. Now where did I lay that hammer? I've heard of losing your car keys, but some poor soul has mislaid his hammer. He must have been looking for it for a long time. I guess he was trying to find an excuse not to finish that honeydew list. What is an iron hammer doing embedded in solid rock? How about this brass bell found in a lump of coal? In 1944, a 10-year-old boy by the name of Newton Anderson dropped a lump of coal in his basement. It broke in half to reveal this beautifully crafted bell. It's made from an unusual brass alloy and has a figured handle and an iron clapper. That coal lump was from a seam estimated to be around 300 million years old. And how about this tiny cast iron pot? How did it end up in a lump of coal that was found in 1912? Consider this little doll. This little clay figure, known as the Nampa image, was found 320 foot down while drilling a well. The truly interesting thing is that it was under several layers of sediment, capped off with a layer of basalt lava. That lava was dated to a minimum of 15 million years old. How did that get there? Doesn't that just screw up some of the common interpretations of history? More on that in a bit. Number 7. Giants.
From the mid to late 1800s and shortly after the turn of the century, newspapers all over the world were reporting discoveries daily of remains of ancient people who were enormous. Reports rolled in with skeletal remains of men from 7 foot to more than 20 foot high. Now, understandably, there are skeptics who thinks that most of these claims were too exceptional to be taken seriously, but there were literally hundreds of well-esteemed newspapers, including the New York Times, who all reported and covered the same stories. Why would 3 different newspapers tell the same lie when their reputation was at stake? Reports of major cover-up of giant remains have been coming in from all over the world. Why? Why would the scientific community try to cover up such an important part of history? Could a popular belief that man started small and gradually gotten bigger over millions of years be hindering science more than it's happened? There have been reports that the Smithsonian has been destroying these remains by the hundreds. How many are still stored in the basements of our museums that no one is allowed to view? Or have they all been destroyed? If there is no cover-up, then why are there so many unusual things still being discovered today? Does the evidence show that a race of giants could have been the mound builders of America? Archaeology still has not satisfactorily answered the mystery of the mound builders. They speculate, they theorize, but they haven't obtained a shred of proof of who and why this culture existed. there has been more breakthroughs in the history of the pagan rituals in Egypt than the mound builders of America. Why? Is it possible that most of the artifacts and remains have been purposely destroyed? You decide.
Number 6. Whose footprints? Did people walk with dinosaurs? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Here we have some amazing examples of dinosaur footprints. Some small, some big. This one's even big enough for a kid to take a bath in. But wait, what's this? Is that a human footprint? Let's see what Dr. Don Patton has to say about this.
But he goes on in this discussion of what would test and falsify evolution, saying, ironically, it's also the reason why creationists are so keen on the fake human footprints which were carved during the Depression to fool tourists in the dinosaur beds of Texas. So he's heard about our work down at Glen Rose all the way from Oxford. He refuses to come look, but he's sure that they're fake, but understands that if they were real, this would falsify and utterly destroy. And of course, one of the main reasons that for the interest is that you can't intrusionally bury footprints, can you? They are where they are. You can't erode them and redeposit, and they don't fall down cracks. And so this is really better evidence than the bones, which he understands. Several of you here have traveled with us down to Dinosaur Valley State Park and seen the footprints there. This is where the Paluxy River runs through the park, and there are just all kinds of dinosaur tracks all over the place down there. They were made famous back in the 40s by Roland T. Byrd, who published a number of articles, and we can see the big sauropod-like elephant tracks almost, and then the three-toed theropods. Here's one of those three-toed tracks, which is rather unusual. It's raised, which caused us to do some head scratching here. How is it? The tracks should be depressed, shouldn't they? Well, yes, but what happened here, the dinosaur stepped, sunk down, left the depressed track. Other material washed over, filled it in, and what filled it in became harder when it became rock, so that when it's later uncovered and erosion now affects it, the center, the infill, is resistant, more resistant to erosion than what's around it, and so it winds up being raised. This is the raised infill. That's significant for some points we'll make again in a moment. But in addition to tracks like this, we also have tracks that look like this. Wonder what that could be. Well, it couldn't be a human track. They were 100 million years apart from the dinosaurs, according to the evolutionists. If they're together, it would utterly destroy, and so well, this one has to be carved, and this is Dawkins' conclusion. We'll come back to that in a moment. I was somewhat intimidated by the objection because it was just almost too good to be true, and so we looked around for some that weren't quite so good, and found some as well. Here's one in the lower right-hand corner that was identified by the Dallas Crime Lab as a human footprint. But the same criteria, they identify footprints at a crime scene, along with dinosaur tracks that had just been excavated. And some of the tracks that we found were very, very human-like. But the explanation was either that this is erosion or they were carved. It has to be one or the other. So we got a new set of objections. Instead of falling down a crack or intrusionally buried, now then it's erosion or carved. Well, Stan Taylor decided to test some of these ideas back in the early 70s, taking a bulldozer, backhoe, and following a trail of two tracks that were seen there in the river that came out of the riverbank. Well, they're alternating layers of clay and limestone and clay and limestone, about 6 feet of them there. And if he removes that and these tracks continue back up under the bank, what would that say about the idea they'd been carved? That'd pretty well rip it, wouldn't it? He did, and yes, found 9 more tracks, for a total of 11, in a right-left pattern, some of them very clear and obvious with the mud push-up around it that you can see here, again arguing against the erosion factor. That doesn't leave a ring around the shape. And so a lot of people got excited about this. It looked like very good evidence. And then Glenn Kuban came up with an explanation, and he got Humanist of the Year for this explanation. He says, are these kind of duck-looking tracks, and there are several of those in the area, erode to look like the one on the right, but the elongate tracks, like you see here at B, erode over a period of time to finally wind up looking like the one down at the lower right-hand corner. And that's kind of human-like, and so these are just eroded dinosaur tracks. And now then we don't have to worry about that anymore. However, when you go back and look at these tracks, here are some of the dinosaur tracks with that infill that was harder. And what happens with erosion here? It gets sharper and clearer because the infill is harder. And when you look at a side view, the three-dimensional aspect of this shows the center being raised, and that's not going to erode to look like a human track, is it? It looks more like a dinosaur track with more erosion. And some of the casts that were made by Stan Taylor were so detailed. Does this look like an eroded dinosaur track? They're just too much detail for that to be a credible thought. You put a human foot in it and it fits perfectly. The one that really persuaded me, and I was trying to play the devil's advocate, is there some way that this could be explained, was this track. And you have to, and this, we extended that 11 track series to 14. This is one in the extension. You have to look at this a minute to really see it. As we highlight this area, you can see the dinosaur portion of it. It's about 25 inches long, but look what is in the middle of it, with all 5 toes and instep and heel. But this one is perfect. Several were saying, well, maybe it's erosion. Others were saying maybe it's carved. And when you get both, you know it's right in the middle and is exactly as good as it can get. We made a presentation of this at a national science meeting up in Tennessee. Glenn Kuban was there, who won Humanist of the Year for explaining these away. He was on the plane the next morning and in the river that afternoon with a long iron pole. And we got several calls saying he's out there with an iron pole, and got out there, and by the time we got there, it looked like this. It had just been beaten to pieces. Of course, we had excellent casts and stereo photographs and hundreds of photographic documentations, but he was evidently pretty impressed with the footprint.
Wow. Did Glenn Kuban really get away with destroying valuable and irreplaceable evidence just because it contradicted his theory? Why is he still considered an expert? Why was he not arrested? And why are these footprints blamed on everything from erosion to aliens instead of considering the evidence? I don't know. What do you think?
If you are enjoying this video and you're interested in crypto-antiquarianology, like and subscribe to this channel.
Number 5. Modern fossils.
We often see many specimens of fossils and are told that these creatures lived millions of years ago. But did they really? We often hear that it takes a minimum 10,000 years for a fossil to form. Why 10,000 years? Who decided that, and what test was done to prove that? Who actually watched an object for 10,000 years to see if it formed into a fossil? Is it possible that certain people must maintain a 10,000 or more year bracket in an effort to support their beliefs? What if science proves differently? Would those believers believe it? Well, there's plenty of evidence that fossils can form rapidly. Here is a fossilized boot with a cowboy's leg still in it. It has been referred to as the limestone cowboy. It was manufactured by M.L. Leddy Boot Company of San Angelo, Texas. They began manufacturing boots in 1936. Galen Leddy, the nephew of the founder, identified the boot by its stitch pattern and indicated that it was made in the early 1950s. How about a fossilized hat? This was a miner's hat found in Tasmania. If that isn't enough, how about a petrified pickle? Now that would go good on a hamburger, wouldn't it? Here's a piece of firewood. Now, did somebody chop on a 10,000-year-old tree and give up because he broke his axe, or was this thing still soft wood when he was cutting on it? How about tree stumps with wood chips scattered all around them that's fossilized? How many years did it take to cut that tree down? How long did it take to pile up this pile of firewood? It's now rock and wouldn't burn very well. Of course, you all know the name of Wild Bill Hickok. His name has captured the imagination of men, women, children, and even Hollywood. James Butler Hickok was born on May the 27th, 1837 in Homer, Illinois. He earned himself several nicknames over the years, but on July the 12th in 1861, David McCannles was shot and killed. Hickok was among the 3 men tried for the killing, but the ruling was self-defense and they were all released. After the McCannles incident, Hickok picked up the name Wild Bill. Over the next several years, Hickok built a name for himself as a gunfighter, gambler, drunk, and lawman before being shot himself in the back of the head by Jack McCall in what was then Deadwood, Dakota Territory on August the 2nd, 1876. Hickok died instantly. Despite his reputation, Hickok was buried in Ingleside Cemetery, Deadwood's original graveyard. But by 1879, the graveyard was running out of room it was full. On the 3rd anniversary of his death, Charlie Utter, who was Hickok's friend and companion, paid to have Hickok's remains moved to the new Mount Moriah Cemetery. As Utter supervised the move, he noted that Hickok's body had been perfectly preserved, but had not been properly embalmed. In any case, calcium carbonate from the surrounding soil had replaced the flesh, leading to petrification. One of the workers, Joseph McClintock, wrote a detailed description of the reinterment. McClintock used a cane to tap the body, the face, and the head, finding no soft tissue anywhere. He noted that the sound was similar to tapping on a brick wall and believed the remains weighed more than 400 pounds. William Austin, the cemetery caretaker, estimated 500 pounds. That's right, Wild Bill Hickok is his own statue now, millions of years old in just 3 short years. On to
Number 4. Polystrate fossils. The geologic column is widely accepted as a valid way to date fossils. But there's just one tiny problem with that. They also use the fossils to date the layers. If you can't determine either independently, that becomes a much bigger problem. One of the main issues with thinking of these changes in layer as different geologic eras is the existence of polystrate fossils. These are fossils that run through multiple layers of rock. Some polystrate fossils, like these trees, are running through many millions of years worth of layers. Now, I don't know how long dead trees hang out standing upright where you're from, but around here, dead trees fall down, and they usually rot within just a few seasons. I can stand up for hours or even days at a time, but this whale seems to have me beat by a couple million years. Can you believe this whale didn't just decay and disappear over the millions of years it would have took to bury it? What other mysteries do science and history hold? Number 3. Brain surgery.
Since the beginning of time, people have been affected by disease, illness, and injuries. Mankind has been in the battle to survive from ancient times to the modern, making major medical breakthroughs. There are literally tens of thousands of discovered ancient remains that indicate broken bones that healed and even traces of disease that killed the victims. Living organisms are remarkable in their ability to heal from major injuries such as broken bones. However, a bone will leave the telltale signs of the injury behind. It's fairly easy to examine the remains of a long-dead individual and see the skeletal proof of healed broken bones. If the bone is still broken, then we have to assume that the individual died shortly after the break. But if the injured bone has healed, then evidence shows the person lived on after the injury for at least a period of time. In 2018, archaeologists in Egypt found a massive black granite sarcophagus in Alexandria. Many were skeptical about opening it in fear of releasing a disease, while others were hopeful that the giant coffin was the final resting place of Alexander the Great. It proved to be neither cursed nor Alexander's. Instead, the sarcophagus contained the bodies of 3 people, which appeared to be a family burial according to the BBC News. One thing that really intrigues me, however, is the hole in the older gentleman's skull that shows a great amount of healing. According to news.artnet.com, the gentleman had at one point went under a brain surgery known as trepanning. These mummies are 2,000 years old. There are many examples of ancient brain surgeries from the Renaissance to ancient Egypt and ancient Americas and beyond. Were these ancient civilizations really what we've been told? Were they actually undeveloped and inferior as some theories would have you to believe? You decide. Now, let's go on to
Number 2. Inca burial stones. No one quite knows why the Inca stones exist. Were they art? A way to preserve the history of the Inca people? A scientific catalog of discoveries? There are many theories, but the one thing we know is that they deal with a wide range of topics, from hunting to studying the stars to the aforementioned brain surgery, all the way to dinosaurs. That's right, dinosaurs. People riding them, fighting with them, even rescuing their friends that have been eaten by them. Stegosaurs, triceratops, long-necked sauropods, even theropods like T-Rex and Velociraptor. How did these ancient and supposedly primitive pre-Incan people know about dinosaurs? That brings us to our next topic and number 1 on our countdown. Number 1. Dragons.
many stories throughout every culture on the planet has their dragons. Mythology has many dragon slayers like Gilgamesh fighting the dragon Humbaba, or Beowulf and the great flame dragon, but could there be any evidence that dragons actually existed? In the Bible we read in Psalms 18:8, there went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. The Bible also has references of the Leviathan in Job 41. Verse 15 starts out, his scales are his pride, shut up together as with a closed seal. One is so near the other that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They stick together, they cannot be sundered. By his neesings a light does shine, and his eyes are like eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and flame goeth out of his mouth. In his neck remaineth strength, and sorrow is turned into joy before him. The flakes of his flesh are joined together. They are firm in themselves, they cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as a stone, yea, as hard as a piece of the nether millstone. When he raiseth up himself, the mighty are afraid. By reason of breakings they purify themselves. The sword of him that layeth at him cannot hold. The spear, the dart, nor the harbigan He esteemeth iron as straw, and brass as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned with him into stubble. Darts counted as stubble. He laughed at the shaking of a spear. Sharp stones are under him. He spreadeth sharp pointed things upon the mire. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. Sounds awful dragon-like, don't it? Have you ever heard of a behemoth? Job 40 in verse 15 says, "Behold now the behemoth." Now, I want to stop for a minute. Would God tell Job to behold now the behemoth if Job could not have beheld the behemoth? He's not going to tell Job to do something you cannot do. But in verse 15 here, he says, "Behold now behemoth which I made with thee. He eateth grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him." Now, I know that some theologians claim that the behemoth was a hippo or maybe an elephant. But look closely, though. The Bible said his tail was like a cedar. Have you ever seen the tail of an elephant? Does that look like a cedar to you? Or maybe a hippo? It's not very cedar-like. Have you ever noticed the tail of an apatosaurus? Now that looks like a cedar, doesn't it? The Bible says that the behemoth was the chief of the ways of God. In other words, the behemoth is the largest animal God ever created. Is dinosaurs really in the Bible? The word dinosaur wasn't even a word till 1841 when Sir Richard Owen coined the term dinosauria, which meant terrible lizard. What was dinosaurs called before 1841? Could they have been known as dragons? Is it possible that all dragon legends in the world had a shred of truth to them? Could dinosaurs have actually been referred to as dragons, and is it possible that we have been lied to? Dinosaurs and man have been together the entire time? In 1742, an author by the name of Charles Owen wrote a book titled An Essay Toward a Natural History of Serpents. In his book, he has drawings of snakes, frogs, lizards, and even crocodiles. We know about all of them, right? No big thing there until you reach the section on dragons. That's right. Why would he talk about dragons in his book unless maybe there were dragons? This is in 1742. He says there is even a dragon skin hanging in the Tower of London in 1742. I wonder what happened to it. When was it taken down? The Inca stones and ancient petroglyphs all over the world show drawings that are undeniably dinosaurs. Some being fought by people, some eating people, some even working under harness and being ridden. Have we been lied to? Are there any other things that might just suggest that we have?
What do you think about these 10 mysteries of the ancient world? If you're interested in more mysteries of the past, like this video and tell us which one is your favorite. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of new and amazing videos coming soon. Thanks for joining us today here on Digging Up Bones.